cannot believe that is reality. It is beyond surreal, dude. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. I'm David Perel, 38 years old, born in South Africa, grew up in Cape Town, currently live in London, and this year I'm racing in the European Le Mans Series for AF Corse. My story of getting into racing is pretty unconventional, especially for professional racing drivers. A lot of professional drivers, people who are paid to race, they sort of go through karting, they probably race in a formula of some kind, and then go into GTs and race endurances, and there's no gap in between. I always wanted to become pro. That was always my main focus, and also going to Le Mans, which was a highlight for me. That to me is I consider my greatest achievement. But I had this weird 8-year gap where I needed to make or find money along the way to try and get my racing career going again. And I only became professional when I was 35, and only really started that part of my pursuit of my career when I was 30. So a lot of people talk about a highlight of like a race highlight or something, but for me it was actually trying to become pro was the main thing for me. And that involved starting a business with my brother, saving money, coming overseas, spending all that money during my sort of amateur period before someone was willing to actually pay me to race. But a weird thing for my career is my reference point was never a specific achievement. Like winning at Spa when I won it felt cool, but it wasn't what I was trying to pursue. It was more like, now that I've won Spa, how does this get me closer to Le Mans? And that was something that possessed me almost my entire life. I didn't want to go to Formula One, I wanted to race at Le Mans. And already in my sort of, during the gap when I wasn't doing any racing, no karting or no GT, I was playing a lot of sim racing stuff. And I would play in these Gran Turismo Le Mans 24-hour events that were hosted by a magazine in South Africa. And I remember racing in that event with my brother and a friend, which we managed to win. And in the background, like while we had these sim racing rigs, in the background was a massive TV of Le Mans. And while we were racing, I would just watch the real race and think, it must be incredible to one day be able to do that. And then many, many years later, I was watching Le Mans on my couch. I saw a guy standing in the pit lane on TV with his helmet on, and he's waiting for the car. It was a night stint. He's waiting for the car to come in, and he's about to jump in the car and go out the pits and absolutely send it. It's like, can you just imagine that feeling? Like, you're standing there at night, and you're about to go and race at nights in Le Mans. And that was like something just lit up under me where I was like, the time to go is now. I was 29 years old at the time. I made a list of all the teams that were racing in Le Mans by copying the entry list that I saw on TV. And then that following Monday, I started to cold email and cold call them. None of them replied except for one team. And he told me all the figures that were required to go racing at Le Mans. So like a seat at Le Mans at that time, it's probably more now, was like 300,000 euros. And he said, even if you had the money, you don't have any experience. You've only done karting. So no one's going to let you into their car and just go do Le Mans. So I did this like crazy process where, through the help of someone who helped me in karting, Claudio Piazzamusso, he introduced me to a guy called Adam McDonald. And then between the three of us, we managed to find a seat in Italian GT. I went over there, started to race Italian GT, used all my savings to do this one race. The race went well, and the engineer introduced me to another team who eventually gave me a seat for the following season. I signed a contract there. It was a 100,000 euro contract that I had to bring. I had zero money, but I signed this thing anyway. And they just went race to race, trying to find the money. It was like 15,000, 20,000 euros per race. Finding the money during the race, finding the money during the race. And almost won the championship, which to me didn't really matter. I was like somehow staying in the world of racing. And it kind of progressed from there. So in Italian GT, we finished second. The following season, I jumped straight into GT3s and started to race with Kessel Ferrari. Also signed a massive contract with no money, zero money to my name. The only money I had was the ability, I could travel at least. I had the money to be able to afford to travel, like from my own personal income. But finding that level of cash for a South African is mental. So anyway, we ended up winning the Blanc One GT Championship, and we also won Spa. And around 2018, a team called Rinaldi, they brought me on, and they basically, the owner of the team, Michele Rinaldi, he made a challenge for me he's like, if you want to race with me and get paid, you're going to have to go at Spa, GT Open Spa. He says you have to get pole position, fastest lap, and you have to lead the race. Like, those are the criteria. It's like, if you do those things, I'll pay you to race, essentially. And I got pole position, I beat the lap record, and I led the race. I did all those three things on the same weekend in the pro class, and 2 weeks later he called me and he says, I'm going to pay you to race from now on. So it was just crazy. Like, even though I'd only started racing GTs, I think it was 4 years prior, it was this build-up from when I was a kid, racing in the Western Province Karting Championship against people like you. And just dreaming, like, imagine you get paid to do what you love. But that still wasn't really a ticket to Le Mans. It actually happened, Le Mans happened much later. And the most emotional moment for me in my whole racing career was the outlap on the first practice session, knowing that this weekend or this week, I was going to be racing at Le Mans. And I remember going around, it was like trying to take it all in. And when I got to the forward chicane to start my first flying lap, I just started to cry. It was like this crazy release of energy and emotion that had been building up, because every time I would email a team to try and get into Le Mans, the answer was no. And then eventually, of course, they gave me a shot. And that was just incredible. It was such a good feeling. When I was going to jump into the car for Le Mans, it wasn't yet a night stint like I'd seen a few years prior on TV. But the nerves are actually pretty high, because you just don't want to crash. And obviously, that's your job, is to keep it on the track. And there's been many stints before that where you think that, but this particular race, knowing how important, how big it is, you want to keep the car on the backside. And it was actually quite a variable stint in terms of weather. There was rain, there was a safety car, but it was so fun. The first few laps I was actually quite tight. I was quite nervous. I wasn't on the pace like that. But once I started to relax a little bit and got my first overtake done with another guy, everything started to flow from there. And that feeling, that was just, if you've driven a racing car, for those watching, you do get into these moments where you go into a zone. Maybe it's not like the ultimate zone, but even just a space where things start to flow. And I managed to get there in that first stint after a few laps. And I remember so many details. I remember I was racing against Fisichella, who, when I was younger, was a Formula One driver. I remember that there was this one Glickenhaus, LMP, or MDH, I think, that they call now, which was struggling in front of me. I remember so many small details from that particular stint, which is rare for me. Like, I've done 7 or 8 Spa in 24 hours, and I remember probably 6 laps of all of them combined. So that Le Mans stint is still very bright in my mind. When you arrive at Le Mans and you're racing for Ferrari in a GTE, you have to play the game of balanced performance. You're not allowed to absolutely maximize the performance of the car in practice. You have to play certain games. You don't use the curves. You're running the Acon on. The wing is not at its minimum, so you're not reaching the top speeds that you usually would. But when you arrive in the race, that's where you can really start to push, and you start to recognize you're consistently going over 300 kph. And things change around 295. Usually GT3 cars and GTEs are going around 285. But at Le Mans, it's a unique place where you get to go over 300. And that feeling in the car is unique. It is unique. But what's even more crazy is you're doing 300, 305. And then a Toyota LMDH comes past you at 340. And makes it feel like you're looking for parking. Also, at Le Mans, we run negative wing. We don't run like wing 1. We run like wing -3. So we're almost like in some way generating lift, if you will. When you go into corners like Porsche curve for the first time, especially on a green racetrack, the way the car moves around and like you're trying to catch oversteer, but if you overcorrect, you're going to flick yourself into the wall through the double left. That feeling is just insane. And once you get into the zone and you can start to feel the tires, like the Michelin tire, which is the confidential, like super secret tire, once you can start to feel that grip and get the confidence, the speed that you can carry through those corners is just mental. You start to think to yourself, because Porsche curves is right, left, right. Through the second left, you think to yourself, is this flat? After like first practice of braking a downshift. So that evolution of confidence, track grip and everything is just mental. I cannot believe that is reality. It is beyond surreal, dude. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. So I'm raced Le Mans in 2021 and 2022. The best year was 2022. Not in terms of ultimate performance. The Porsches had a huge advantage over us. But between Ferraris, that's what you try and do. If you realize, as a manufacturer, you don't really have the balanced performance to compete for a win, you start to do like a sort of intra-manufacturer fight, like which is the fastest Ferrari. And I had 2 really good or fun stints in 22 against Nick Cassidy, who races, who's a Formula E and so on, and also Mikkel Jensen, who's now he's a Peugeot MDH driver. And just chasing those guys, like trying to match their lap times and so on. They've been racing their whole lives. They're still young and fast. I'm 38 and slow. I'm not that slow, but I'm not as fast as they. I remember so many details of those stints at night. When you race at night specifically, it's like, oh man, it's the best thing ever. It's quiet, even though you've got the engine. No one's really talking on the radio, and you're just full attack. And all you can see is that little focal point because everything else is dark. So it really focuses the mind. And then on top of that, you've got someone who you respect, you're trying to chase down. Best feeling ever. The chances of doing Le Mans going forward are quite slim because now they've opened it up to GT3s and each manufacturer will be able to enter 2 cars. And I suspect that each manufacturer will use factory drivers only for their lineups, along with a gentleman or amateur driver. So each car has to have an amateur, silver, and a pro. I suspect that the silvers, I'm a silver rank driver, will be either factory drivers or they'll be the coach of the gentleman driver. So I don't see myself in either of those positions, which is in one way it's a shame, but at the end of the day, I managed to do Le Mans. That was always my dream. 2022 was the full experience, hundreds of thousands of spectators. So if it all ended today, I can't complain.